And with that, we are joined by my brothers in the building, standing in at a nice 6'1", 219 pounds. Yeah, I know that's different than what he was just yesterday. Don't think about it.
It
How you doing, man? How was Super Bowl Sunday?
was it was interesting for sure.
Where'd you watch the game? Do you go out or do you stay at home or do you go out to watch the game?
So I ain't spending money to watch somebody else's team play a sport I don't even like that much. Hell no.
That's valid. That's
I was
valid.
in the house.
Uh, you went out just for what, the Ravens playoff game then?
Shit. Nah, I didn't. I went out for the Bills game, but that wasn't a situation where it was like, okay, I'm going out to watch the game. We was going to a concert that night, so I was like, I might as well just go somewhere to watch the shit.
Oh, that's valid. That's valid. So I started off the show. I took both angles, and so the Eagles angle to me is this is, and I texted you earlier. This is a Howie Roseman story. I'm not going to be somebody who goes, "Oh, quarterback wins the Super Bowl, he's now elite." I'm not going to say, "Coach now wins the Super Bowl, now he's elite." Especially if you're Nick Sirianni. I know it's great right now, but if you look at your predecessor, who also won a Super Bowl and then had one down year, they got him out of there too. What I do think is impressive and the consistent part about Philadelphia is Howie Roseman and what he has done with this roster, this franchise. He is, I know Brett Veach has gotten a lot of love the last couple of years of what he's done in Kansas City, and because they have the majority of the Super Bowls, he was elevated to best GM status. But if you look at Philly's roster, top to bottom, even in that game yesterday, they just looked better than Kansas City in multiple areas. And we know who the stars are in Kansas City. But even with Kansas City having Chris Jones, Jalen Carter was the best defensive tackle in that game. That defensive line was better than Kansas City's defensive line. The offensive line, even though Kansas City has two Pro Bowlers and an All Pro and maybe the best center in the game, Philly center was better. What he's done with this roster, and this was congrats to you when we did our pregame show. This was your pick for the Super Bowl. Is did I'll ask you did it play out how you thought it was going to play out? And am I not giving enough credit to Hurts and Sirianni, which is what we normally do with Super Bowls, giving quarterback head coach the credit?
Um, it didn't play out how I thought it would from the game. I didn't think the Chiefs would get beat like that. I'm not surprised they got beat like that. I will say that. It played out in the way that I thought from the sense that the team with the better players won. You know, more talent wins in the end. That's generally how sports works. And unlike college sports, you can't really skate around that. Like you have to have guys at key positions. In the Eagles case, at damn near every position, you gotta have guys. And when you got guys, you got studs that can go out there and just win one on one, that can out talent the next guy. You end up with results like that. I wouldn't say that you're not giving Hurts and Sirianni enough credit, per se. At least Sirianni, like I said, he's Ryan Day. With all due respect, anyone could do Sirianni's job and have the same success. It is just, and that's not his fault. You know, he got hired to coach a team that throughout the years has had talent put on it for him to coach. That's what this is. You know,
Mhm.
it's not, you don't just put a bunch of motherfuckers on a team and say, "Here, do your best." You hire a coach that you think can build a culture around the players you have, then you bring that coach more players that are just as good or better than the ones you currently have, and that's what they've done. For Jalen Hurts, I tweeted last night, he's now outplayed Mahomes in two Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Two Super Bowls. One Super Bowl, he lost on the last second field goal. The other Super Bowl, he beat the shit out. They beat the shit out of the Chiefs. And like I said, everybody has to have an Eli. And that's
Yeah.
not to say Jalen Hurts is better or not better than Eli. I'm going to let his career play out before I even like speak on that part of it all. But you
Mhm.
you gotta have the all-time great has to have an adversary that people look at as not being a one-to-one. The all-time greats have to have that guy that people may think in theory they don't really stand a chance, and they end up going out there and smacking them in the mouth. You know, like that's how this goes. You generally have that with all the all-time greats.
Everybody got
Um,
a Mario Chalmers.
Everybody has the Mario Chalmers. Everybody has a Mario Chalmers. So it's like I would say that I would say that I would give more credit to the players on defense. Like I also another tweet that I tweeted last night. Like that was one of the greatest Super Bowl performances I've seen from a defense. Is
True.
an all-time performance. Your team's been on both sides of that. They've kicked ass and they've had it kicked. It is what it is.
Uh,
So on multiple times when I think about Denver, actually.
Denver's,
So
yeah, no, we were my the few I only had two people over. One of them asked about halfway through, like, "Yo, what's the most points ever scored in the Super Bowl?" And I'm triggered and have PTSD from this shit from a year I wasn't even alive, and I was like,
live, yeah.
the 49ers scored 55-10 in Denver in '89. They like, damn, and I'm like, yeah, no, I was like negative
That'll
5 years
happen.
old.
That'll
I was
happen.
like, bro. So
But but yeah, just what those guys did on defense last night, from top to bottom, the front seven to the back end, everybody been able to hold their own, and it goes to show, it goes to show that the Chiefs were 15-1 this year.
mhm.
They were pretty much Josh Allen away from finishing the season 17-0. They were not a 15-1. They were 15-2, weren't they? Or
Yeah,
16-1?
yeah, but I understand why.
They were, yeah, 15-1 because they played Denver last week and they rested starters, whatever, whatever.
Josh Allen and Bo Nix, only two quarterbacks, and Jalen Hurts, only three quarterbacks to beat the Chiefs this year.
They beat the Chiefs, right? So
Just
they
you know,
they went 15-2, and who was to say if had they got past Buffalo and would they have went for it in that Broncos game? Who's to say? But
hmm.
we and knowing that 15 wins, 2 defeats, and knowing all of that, it never felt like it. It just never felt like it. And the only thing that kept us afloat was okay, Spags' defense, they always get it done in the end. Um, Mahomes and Kelsey, they always figured out no matter what. You trust the pedigree. And and I agree with that sentiment, but I just it like I talked about last week on here when we did our segment last week, is like it come at a point in time that shit just does not matter when you don't have the pieces at a point in
Mhm.
time, like the narratives and the history and the mystique of a motherfucker. It just don't matter when you playing guys that are just flat out better, and that showed itself last night.
So that's where to transition from that to my Kansas City perspective is Mahomes, you can't deny. Like he's already, and I sent this in the text. I'm like, if you're being realistic, we obviously know Brady's won. I could understand. I will listen to Joe Montana arguments because Joe still has 4 Super Bowls, was undefeated in the Super Bowl. Cool. That's probably where it ends. I understand there's and I love Payne because lifelong Bronco. I get the 5 MVPs hold a lot of weight, but realistically, Mahomes, it's him, Joe, and then Tom.
Peyton won 5 MVPs.
5 MVPs.
God damn.
No, Payton's great, and I always give Payton a little bit extra credit because like there is the way people play quarterback now, as far as at the line of scrimmage, like that was him. Um,
I feel like
but
I
he's
only
got
remember 3, maybe 4, but shit, he won 5.
you won 5. He still has the record for most touchdowns and yards in the season, and they added a game,
Yes,
so nobody caught him.
it's not going to be touched, I fear. I really don't. That fifth, what was that, 55 and 5,500?
Yep.
Yeah,
No,
nah,
he was on something
it's
else
not
that
getting
year.
touched. It's not getting touched.
But this is the next step for Mahomes, which is so Joe didn't play during the salary cap, so he got to basically keep like he had Ronnie Lott his whole career. He had Jerry Rice pretty much his whole career. Like he got to have his guys the whole time. Where Brady started to separate is because of how the salary cap works. We had to see different iterations of Brady. And we are now, this is where Mahomes is going to have to prove it is, yeah, it sounds crazy that, oh, well, they're going to get another Super Bowl. They're going to get back. We all acknowledge Brady's the GOAT. He went 10 years in between. And in those 10 years, it wasn't like he was a bum. He had the 07 team, highest scoring offense ever at the time, 50 touchdowns. The 11 team, another great team, like the 500 yards against Philly in the Super Bowl. He had dominant years. It's the idea that Kansas City fans, I get it. You've been the best team in the league last 6 years. You've been to 4 Super Bowls. Great. This is now, what are you going to do? Because we are finally seeing Kelsey, for the first time in his career in a big game, looked old. In Chris Jones, we'll see how much longer. He's a defensive tackle. He's on the other side of 30 now. Andy Reid, is he going to continue to have this fastball this late in his career? Like, we're going to have to see what is the next form of Kansas City. This could have been the end of the dynasty. And I know to Kansas City fans, it sounds insane, but this stuff does just stop after a while. At one point, Brady just stopped winning. Went again 0-4 to 13. The or 14, I'm sorry. Yeah, 13. We talked trauma Super Bowl. Joe Montana just stopped winning at some point. So like I think it's not just as simple as, oh, he's gonna keep doing this the entirety of his career. And nice to know last night is we can finally, I think the internet finally took a chill on like, yeah, no, what Tom Brady did is ridiculous. And I'm just not expecting somebody to go do that. So your thoughts on how Mahomes, how he played, and the future of Kansas City?
I thought he played to what he could. And he didn't really stand a chance against the front. And that was evident after the first few drives. It just wasn't going to be one of those nights. That offensive line has not been good all year. 1 through 5. They haven't been the most healthy group, specifically like on that left side when we talk about left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Um I like Trey Smith is fine to me. He's good. I don't. It's a lot of like they're going to lose Trey Smith talk. I don't really like. You don't want to lose good players. I get it, but he's been talked about as like I don't know. Like it's kind of I'm not super in tune with like offensive linemen. I try to keep up as much as I can. So it's like I don't want to. I'm not saying like Trey Smith is bad and you don't want to lose him, but he's being talked about as like the best right guard in the league, and I don't know if he's that.
No, he's
Um,
definitely not.
Creed is still
Creed's great.
top notch. Like Creed's still top notch. He did what he could. It was tough for him last night. It was tough for Joe Tooney last night. And then like the Jawan Smith thing is we knew what it was for the last year and a half now, but it reared its head last night in a real way. And it was bad. Josh Sweat was doing whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah.
So like Mahomes really he didn't really stand a chance. Like it was it was tough. And then you don't have the necessary weapons out there that can just make plays in an instant. Like Xavier Worthy showed up to play. Shout out to him. He balled. He balled out yesterday. He did all he could do in the given the circumstance. D Hop
Mm-hmm.
is not it's not 10 years ago. He just couldn't really do much. And in Hollywood, like I know Hollywood, like, Hollywood Brown he's a fine receiver, he's good, but he's not that guy that's just gonna take that game over, specifically in a case like this where you don't know how healthy he is. He missed most of the season. And it was tough going up against that Eagles secondary. Like I going back to the draft last year, I laughed at how he ended up with DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon Mitchell was cornerback one for me in that draft, and I thought DeJean was the best all around DB. I thought he could play inside, outside. I thought he could play safety, and that he showed that this season. Like I laughed at that. That was ridiculous to me how he got away with that. But it's it was just a rough night for him, and like I said, this is going to change a lot of the talk because to be 3-2 compared to 4-1 is so much different.
Facts.
And when people who want to get their takes off and want to get their narratives off, when they really look at it, they're going to break it down even more than it already has been. And they'll look at the first 49ers Super Bowl and they'll like we talked about, maybe I think it was last week they'll dissect that. They'll dissect the Tampa one even more than it already was. They'll look at the first Eagles Super Bowl. They'll look at last year's 49ers Super Bowl. And I think that the era we're in, he's he's been built up so high and deservedly so. He's going to be taken back down now the more years he goes without a championship. And I don't think that's necessarily fair, but I also don't see them winning another championship for the next few years. And maybe that's a hot take, like whatever, sue me. But like they have not had good teams. And they've been able to get around that because Spags has been able to put together great game plans at the right times, meaning in these last few playoff runs. But that's also a benefit of playing teams that they have generally just beat all the time anyway. They've been able to match up against the Bills, who they always beat. They were able to match up with Houston in these playoffs this year without the majority of their receiving core and also a struggling offensive line. They were able to match up against the Ravens last year in the AFC Championship game and just a good spot for them. And that's not to say like, well, the competition's bad. That's just to say things have broken their way. And that's how sports goes. Sometimes shit just goes your way until it all of a sudden does not go your way anymore.
No, 1,000%.
So in the case of this team, they have a lot of free agents. They'll be able to maneuver the money around how they do, but like what does Travis Kelsey mean next season? Like even if he decides not to retire, like what does that mean?
Mhm.
It doesn't mean much. It just doesn't.
No,
Um
1,000%.
Big Red will probably keep coaching and that's fine, but eventually eventually the toolbox ain't as full as it was. And a lot of younger motherfuckers, sharper motherfuckers that have watched these plays and have watched these calls over the years, they have spent their 20s and their early 30s game planning for the time when they get the matchup against Andy Reid. Like this is how all of this goes. Evolution happens, change happens, and that team is going to have to change a lot. How much can they invest in the offensive line is going to dictate what they can do next year. And if they can't invest a lot in it, or it's just not the opportunities there for them, who knows?
It's interesting because yes, everything they're about to have the most turnover they've had. I know the Tyreek Hill trade is I think made it seem like, oh, they've had all this turnover and that's crazy. Like, no, it was just Tyreek Hill. And what's going to be interesting as far as a narrative talk for Patrick is where people are going to, and again, I don't think this is fair. Again, I think he's in a competition at worst with two other guys. I think he's pretty confident in that three hole. If again, love Payton, if you want to say he's four, fine. 7 years into your career, and people are saying you the one of the five best to ever do what you do is all time stuff. But I think people are going to start looking at you beat Jimmy Garoppolo, you beat Brock Purdy, you're 1-1 against Jalen Hurts, and you're 0-1 against Brady. And both Brady and Hurts had a game where they beat you. Like you are now going to have for the all-time greats, and this is nitpicking, you're going to have two really bad Super Bowl losses. Like Brady's worst loss is probably '07, but that was because of the expectations. They were undefeated going into that game. It wasn't like the Giants blew them out. Same thing in 11. It wasn't like the Giants blew them out. Um, the
And they
Philly
didn't
one
punt
that
in
he
that
lost.
Eagles in that Eagles one.
Yeah,
Like
he
they
had
didn't punt
500
the ball.
yards. So it's like, even though he lost, again, '07 is probably the worst because, like, yeah, it was the '07 team should have, like, that Giants team historically is one of the weaker Super Bowl teams. But they did similar to what Philly did last night, which is any great quarterback, and this is why offensive line is so important. Any great quarterback can't do anything if you can just get pressure with four guys. It is
Hmm.
impossible to play the sport. And then even
Hmm.
on the broadcast, shout out to Tom, but even they're like, oh yeah, they got to bring someone in. I'm like, bro, you can't bring someone in to extra protect on four guys because now you've only got three receivers on the routes. They got seven people in coverage still. Like, what are you going to do? You basically get to double team everybody and still have a safety over the top. So
Yeah.
even if you're blocking that extra guy, like in Jalen Carter, monster. Like he wrecked that game. He was doing whatever he wanted to do, and that was against some plays against Humphrey, who's an All Pro, some plays against Thuney, who's an All Pro, and just totally tore him up. The I got one NBA question for you here, but I'll give you your way too early NFL power rankings for next year. Where do the Chiefs and Eagles land?
Eagles got to be one. I feel like shit. I probably would have had them two coming into the season. They got to be one. The Chiefs still accounting for there's not many NFC teams better than them,
Mm-hmm.
and even the AFC teams that you would think are they beat them all the time. So I would say at worst they're three. At worst they're three. who's two? You could probably go between either the Ravens or the Lions, even maybe even Buffalo. But
Mhm.
at worst the Chiefs are three. At best they're two.
That's fair. I think that I think I'm with you. I do want to see. I think with the big three in the AFC, which obviously free agency can change some things. I mean, Miles Garrett being available is huge. Um, Especially if you look at a game like last night, where yeah, if you can just get pressure with four guys, and Miles Garrett's pretty good at that. That's a huge piece of beating them. I think the
I want
big three.
I
Oh,
just want to
God.
say real quick. I want to know what like the take the Ravens out because the Browns 10 years ago that stupid. The Browns today not that stupid. So the Ravens are out. Who and I generally would want to think most AFC teams are out. Most. But I really want to know what contenders are going to take a shot at Miles Garrett. I really want to see who's going to throw it all in.
I think that I agree with you. I think they're both NFC teams, with the exception of there's probably an AFC team. So there's like a scenario with Buffalo because of Vaughn's contract, and there's some opt out clauses because he was hurt. There's an argument Buffalo could put together a crazy trade package, but it would basically be like, yo, you gotta win next year kind of deal because they'd mortgage a lot of
Yeah.
stuff away. So maybe Buffalo could overpay, but besides that, I think it's an NFC team. And I think the only two that make some sense in my mind because they could give a huge package and still have a lot of talent is it's the Lions, who don't really need draft picks. The Lions are in a position where, like, look, you're gonna have to pay Panay Sewell next year. You're gonna have to pay to their left tackle. I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Taylor Decker.
Yeah. It's like you got other guys you got to pay. You just paid Amon-Ra St. Brown, and his contract's going to start kicking in where he's actually, obviously coming off his rookie deal. Now he's going to actually be the $25-30 million a year receiver. So you don't really need more draft picks at the moment because most draft picks aren't going to play for you. So the Lions could do it. And then that gives you kind of get to ease Aiden Hutchinson in next year. And when he's finally healthy, if you're saying Aiden Hutchinson and Miles Garrett as your edges, that's an argument as the best edge rushers in the league. And then the other team I think could do it, and this is all depending on what they do, and I don't believe any of the reports of what they do with their quarterback, is San Francisco could do it. Because San Francisco
Mm,
is still not
interesting.
not because they haven't committed to Purdy. It's such a and because there's potential by them trading Debo. Yes, they have several guys who are paid top of their position. The way the NFL salary cap is, if you're not paying your quarterback top of the market money, you could damn near pay 10, 11 other positions top of the market money. Like that's just how big the spread is between quarterbacks and the next highest guys up.
I
So
would love to see Green Bay maybe look at that.
Green Bay could do it. Green Bay is weird because they only make a handful of free agent moves like in the history of the franchise. And so market wise for them, it'd be a little off, but I agreed. I think they would. Miles Garrett's is going to make any team he goes on, he is immediately going to bump you up a level. He's just that great of a
Hmm.
player. He's the argument. I mean, I understand the TJ Watt arguments. I would take Miles Garrett if we're just saying the best standalone pass rusher in the sport. Um, so I do think Garrett is going to be a swing factor in those big AFC teams and top NFC teams. Last question before we get you out of here, and this is a basketball question. Uh, Luka makes his debut tonight, or at least that's what's scheduled. ESPN already got played on that once. Imagine buying the rights for a game and then they like, nah, Luka's not only is Luka
That
not
was
playing,
that was
LeBron
very
ain't playing
funny.
either.
That was and they beat the shit out the Pacers too. That was a
I
very
was
funny
like,
night.
it's like, damn. Um, LeBron's obviously 40, but still great. Luka's theoretically in the prime of his career. What can this Lakers team do going forward? Luka, LeBron being your centerpieces, and Austin Reeves is your third guy.
Shit, man. I want this is when I want us to discuss Sunday coming up.
Mm,
It's I don't know. I don't know. In in a 7 game series, they're most of the time going to have the two best players, and it's not the same as like they've got the two best players, Kyrie and Luca. Like even at 40, like LeBron is still arguably the best player on the floor whenever he steps on the floor. So it's
yeah.
like I don't know. Like their pieces in theory aren't great, but they work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, JJ's done a hell of a job putting these pieces together. Dorian Finney-Smith's playing good ball for him. Um, Rui's playing well. Like I don't know. Like I don't know their ceiling, but they're interesting. I will say that they are interesting and much more interesting than I thought they were a month ago. And
No, facts.
obviously the trade, but more so just the other pieces.
Mm-hmm. No, I think they're I, as weird as it is, and I think everyone's pretty much come to the same consensus. OKC's the best team. I also think that in a playoff series, I think OKC won't say it publicly, obviously, but they would really love it if someone else knocked out the Lakers. You don't want to be in your first big playoff series with a still incredibly young team, even your MVP candidate being really young. Like, you don't want to be tight situation, close game, series tied 1-1, and LeBron and Luka are walking the ball down the last 3 minutes of a fourth quarter. Like, that's just not the position you want to be in, especially because, and I had the same criticism for Harden and the same criticism for other style of players. We need to see what is the officiating going to be like for SGA in the playoffs. I'm aware he had the one game, and I know Twitter loved to tell me, oh, he only shot like 4 free throws and got to like 30 something points. And I'm like, yeah, did you see how many he shot in the 50-point games? Did you see this man swing the ball up, dude fly right by him, and him fake in the air and then get? I was like, all right, bro, we got. And I'm out here watching Zion get pile driving to the floor, and they're like, nah, no foul, big dog, keep going. I'm like, all right, bro. But so I think that's now if you're OKC specifically, again, that's not the matchup you want because of LeBron. Even at 40, you're right. For stretches of the game, he's just so smart that he could still make the biggest impact on the court, which is just fucking insane. It makes no sense. Like, bro, you 40, go home. With that being said, though, appreciate you as always, man, for coming on. We're gonna catch you on Sunday and then back here next week.
Yep. Peace.